So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, September the 20th, and this is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 276. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is the way to be. So I'm really glad that you're here. We're coming up, wow, September is just going away. Plenty of forage still out there, as you saw in the opening sequences. There's a lot going on. And you might wonder what the temperatures are outside before we get started with today's topics. And I'll tell you, it's 79 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 26 Celsius, 3-mile-per-hour winds. So it's nice and mild out there with just 4.8 kilometers per hour. And the best part, 49% relative humidity. Who cares about that? Well, we do, because we're beekeepers. And that low humidity right now is helping our bees dry out their hives. I don't know about you guys, but here in the northeastern United States, state of Pennsylvania, we have lots of bearding going on because we're in the middle of a big nectar flow. The, let's see, Cosmos, still going strong, of course, but you know, those are only the ones that I plant. So what really matters are the natives that are out in the wider environment. So the goldenrod still strong. The asters, so many different varieties of asters. It's actually pretty darn interesting. I walked around, I was looking at all the different asters, and here's one of the things I did this past week. I had to thin some of the honey out on some of the hives. So I went through and I was going to pull the frames that were fully capped. And some of the frames half capped, half uncapped, but yet they were full all the way to the top of the cell. So what do you think I did? I took them. And one of the things you need to do if you're going to take uncapped cells of honey is you're going to want to test it with a refractometer. Refractometer is going to let you know what the water percentage is. Guess what the water percentage is on those frames that had uncapped honey? 7.1%. That is very good, just in case you didn't know. Anything from 18 to 19 is okay. 19 to 20, better watch yourself. Over 20, guaranteed to ferment. So at 17.1, that met with the requirements of my supervisor who has clients, as he told me, waiting for honey. So if you don't know who the supervisor is, that's my 9-year-old grandson. He was 8, just turned 9, had a party, and he's older and more of a smarter than ever now. So, if you want to know what we're going to talk about, please look down in the video description. All the topics are there in order, and there are going to be some links in there that will help you out today. There's some research going on that you might be interested in. So, if you want to know where to go to submit your own topic for consideration, please go to my main website, thewaytobee.org, and there's a page also called The Way to Bee. You can fill out that form there, and maybe we'll talk about whatever is on your mind related to backyard beekeeping. And we say backyard beekeeping, we're happy to deal with beginner topics, but we really cover everything. That it could be any spectrum, anything in the spectrum of beekeeping. There's no limits. And of course, I made everyone happy by putting out a video this past week on the update of my yellow jacket wasps, which are in a dawn redwood tree in my backyard. And I pulled out all the stops, got people up very close and almost too personal based on some of the feedback I got. I was told by some of the people that we are no longer friends just because I am showing them pictures of a yellow jacket wasp that did not include killing them, hitting them with a flamethrower, or blasting with an oversized squirt gun or something like that. Instead, heaven forbid, we're learning about them. So that's ongoing. And if you're one of the people that appreciates that, thank you so much. I think as beekeepers, it helps us out if we know a little bit more about the environment and the other animals, other insects, wasps in particular, sometimes hornets, that share the environment with their honeybees. Maybe they're not as big a threat as you might think. So keep your mind open, learn some new stuff, or maybe just not be as afraid. I think it's interesting when beekeepers call me to come and deal with yellow jacket wasps or the European hornets, because really they're focused on bees and are unfamiliar with a lot of other insect species. So I think it's good to learn a little bit and slow down, take your time. So let's see what else is going on. One of the things that's coming up before we get started with the questions, and there are not a lot of questions today, so I have lots of time for filler. In the cover shot today, I was holding up 2 bags. One of them is this one. This is from Hive Alive, which I'm sure you've heard of. And the other one is just a Ziploc baggie. Now this is not full of sugar syrup, this is just water, because I figured, man, if this thing breaks, I'd rather just have water everywhere. But these are the 1 gallon size jugs, so for a size comparison. But here's the thing, when you get to the end of the year, I had a question recently, do I feed all of my beehives? And I don't. It's only the ones that are light. It's always the late season swarm that has to be helped out. If you go and inspect your hives and you find out that they're just not storing enough capped honey to get them through winter, and here in the state of Pennsylvania, see, it may be different where you are. They need about 45 pounds of honey to get through winter. So I have a deep brood box and then a medium super over that is just for the bees, and that configuration remains the same. Unless it's a new colony, they might have just a single brood box or something like that. If they're light this time of year, first of all, that would be amazing. I would be concerned about the colony that was not very productive unless it's a newly hived swarm. So if you don't see a lot of activity on your landing boards right now of an established colony, it's worth an inspection. You want to look in there and find out if they're queen right. They might have lost their queen, or they might have swarmed recently. Swarming is not the end of the world. They still have a little bit of time, but they're going to be in a pickle. So bag feeding. Please do not put fondant on your hives yet. And we're going to have to talk about this every week. We talked about it at our beekeeper breakfast last Wednesday, which was a lot of fun, I'd like to say. But the thing is, if you put fondant on too soon, or even sugar, some people put dry sugar on there, which is something I did for many years. I took Rapid Round feeders, I poured it full of a 4-pound bag of dry processed sugar, and I just let the bees work on it through winter. So if you put this stuff on early, they don't seem to pay a lot of attention to the dry sugar right now, or even sugar bricks. But if you put fondant on, even fondant you make yourself, or my preference is Hive Alive fondant, they go up into that pretty darn quick. In other words, they actually bypass their own honey to get to it. That's why I just want to reiterate, please wait until the nights are freezing, until the temperatures are dropping, and that's when you start to put on the fondant. So if you've got a colony that's struggling right now that needs a boost, that's why we're talking about syrup. So one of the things that you can do, first of all, the delivery of this. This is from Hive Alive. This is their Easy Feed syrup. That's why I'm talking about it. This packet is flat on the bottom and it domes up over the top. So you need a feeder shim to accommodate it. Standard feeder shim is 2 inches. So sometimes people just take a shallow super or even a medium super, put it on top of their inner cover, and it leaves them a big space up there. So you would not put this directly over the hole, which is in the center of your inner cover for the bees to come up and feed on, because you're going to take a needle and poke holes in the top of it. That means you set it to the side of the hole, and you could even put 2 of these up there. These are 2 pounds a piece. Put 2 of these up there, bees come through the middle, go up, and they feed through the holes, and then they just drain this down. 0 drowned bees. 0 leaking packets. So they're convenient. Now they're expensive. So that's why I'm giving you options. I want you to have a lot to think about. First of all, the Hive Alive Easy Feed. This is the label that was inside the box. It's kind of torn up a little bit, but no mixing, no feeding, no washing, no mess. It says this is a dose of Hive Alive. So that's the other thing I want to talk about as we get to the end of the year, because when you finish removing honey from your hives, that's when you can backfeed supplements and sugar syrup and things like that to help a struggling colony of bees. So there's only one supplement that has a scientific study published that shows that it works and that it benefits your bee's microbiome in the bee gut, right? And that's Hive Alive syrup. The Hive Alive syrup is pre-mixed in that Easy Feed packet, which they just came out with this year. So I went online to look at the Hive Alive website, because they also have a little insert for their fondant packs that's like a little standoff, create space in there so it won't collapse down on the fondant. I know we're talking about syrup right now, but while I'm thinking about this, I wanted to mention it. I went there, and of course they're sold out. So you can't even get one of these little things that keeps it open. So what I do is I take smoothie straws. I don't know if you know what those are, but smoothie straws are bigger in diameter than a normal straw. And I have a whole pack of them. Of course, I don't happen to have one sitting right here at the moment, or I'd show it to you. But anyway, I clip them, little 2-inch sections, and I just, once you cut the hole in your fondant pack, I stick the little smoothie straws in there. That keeps it puffed up, and the smoothie straws are big enough in diameter for the bees to travel right through them. So that keeps them open so your bees can clean out your fondant packs all the way to the corners. And fondant packs do sit directly over the hole in your inner cover. So with these, with the holes in them, sitting off to the side, the bees come up through, they go over the top, and they stick their tongues through the little pinholes. It seems like they're not big enough, but they are, and then we'll drink this down. So this helps them out. This is on par with ProSweet. A lot of you might be familiar with Mann Lake's ProSweet. I've used it in the past. Again, it's a premix, it's a heavy syrup. And so I did a little price check just before I came on today, just for you. ProSweet, so this is, if you get the easy syrup from Hive Alive, it comes 9 2-pound packages. Okay, so we have 18 pounds of syrup. If you go to ProSweet, it's 37, let's see. ProSweet is $37.95 per gallon. So comparably $56.92 for equal amount of ProSweet, and this stuff costs $49.95. So they're both expensive. So if you don't want to spend that kind of money and you decide you want to just mix up your own, buy your own sugar syrup, make the 2-to-1. So 2-to-1 is 16 pounds of dry sugar to 1 gallon of water. So once you mix all that up, then you'll put your Hive Alive supplement in it, the syrup, because we want to kick off our bees at the end of the year with a healthy microbiome. And then if you wanted to feed it with this method, that's why I showed you my industrial heavy-duty Ziploc baggie 1 gallon size. So then you would just lay this on top. Of course, this is a lot more fluid because it's just full of water. But you could put that on. It holds a gallon. I don't know how much I would want to put in there, but same thing, you just poke little holes in it. And here's the difference between feeding this way and using, let's say, an inverted jar feeder. With these little packets, as the bees drink it down, if you notice, there's no air bubble in here. There's no expansion of the air inside the bag, whether it's the Easy Feed from Hive Alive or a Ziploc baggie of sugar syrup you mix yourself, squeeze the air bubbles out. And then as they drink it down, it just collapses on itself. So when we get those nights where it's 39, 40 degrees Fahrenheit at night, and then in the daytime, it jumps all the way up to the 70s. If that were an inverted jar with an airspace in it, that airspace would warm, expand, and express the syrup right down onto your bees. Now, some people say, oh, the bees will keep up with that just fine. Well, I don't trust that in particular, so that's why I don't like that method personally. Because I've observed it in what? My observation hives. They put inverted jars upon there, and next thing you know, you've got syrup dripping out the bottom of the hive through the screen bottom board. And we're going to talk about screen bottom boards today too. So these little packets, make yourself or buy, they don't ooze out sugar syrup because you don't have the expansion and contraction because there's no air in there. It's all liquid. You cannot compress water. Think about it. So that's enough for that. So I covered the Easy Feed because I wanted you to know this ahead of time because I want it top of your mind. I don't want any of your bees starving as you go into winter, because then once we get below freezing, liquids don't go on your hives anymore. Why don't we feed liquids in the wintertime? If it's super thick like honey, you could probably get away with it, but you're adding water to the bees. Bees are going to get their water inside the hive if you have no top venting. You have condensation that will form below the cluster on the interior sidewalls, and your water bees are going to get that resource and move that into your cluster for you. So we want to take care of our bees, but you don't want to give them a bunch of water that they have to hold in their bodies and then wait until they can get out and do a cleansing flight once things get really cold. Now, if you live somewhere where your bees can fly out every single day, it's never too cold for them to fly, or it gets to at least a couple of hours a day when your bees can fly out and do cleansing flights, then you can feed sugar syrup all winter long if you need to for a colony that's struggling. I'm also not a fan of putting a whole pile of supplements in your sugar syrup because a lot of people ask me, can I just put a bunch of pollen in there? Should I put pollen traps out and mix the pollen into it? And should I put some Ultra B dry pollen substitute into my sugar syrup and stuff like that. Please do not. What they really need is the carbohydrate. But Fred, you just told us that this stuff has Hive Alive in it. Yes, because the Hive Alive is in the syrup, which acts on something that's attacking your bee's microbiome. It is Nosema cerana. So those are living organisms that are living inside your bee and making your bees sickly in a way that you don't notice. So it could shorten their lives. It could cause them all kinds of problems. But it also affects their ability to digest resources. So if we can get Nosema down in your hives. Now, what if my bees don't have Nosema? Then what would be the point of getting them Hive Alive? Well, I suppose they speculate. You'd have to read the study, first of all, and there is a study. And you can go to my website because I linked it there to keep things easy. Because on my page where it says Hive Alive Works, if you go there, any updates to the study or any new things that are learned about the benefits to your bees will be posted there. You can also just go directly to their website and read more about it. So feed your bees, but liquids, if you're in a cold climate where the bees are going to be stuck inside the hive for months, weeks at a time, in our case it's going to be several months, then you don't want to be feeding liquids. That's why we shift to fondant or sugar bricks, candy, things like that. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, what else are we going to do? If you have a question right now that's eating you up and you just have to know and you want to talk to somebody about it, please go to Facebook, The Way to Bee Fellowship. And you can ask, if you're not a member, you can ask to join. And I guarantee there's no marketing, there is no pitching of products, there is no spam, and there is zero politics. How cool is that? So anyway, let's get into question number 1, which comes from Chris from Northeast PA. So right here in my state. I've heard you talk about sealing the gaps between the feeder shim and the Bee Smart inner cover with expansion foam. Do you basically glue them together for good with the foam? It sounds messy if you ever want to separate the two. Thanks. So yes, that's what I do. If you want to do a look on my website or my YouTube channel, I used to make my own feeder shims. And the feeder shims were basically a medium box, even though I just built them myself. And I put the inner cover as part of this box. And that was before Bee Smart Designs came out with this polystyrene insulated inner cover that's domed, that in other words, feature-wise, it's better off than what I was making myself completely out of wood. So one of the things I did was I didn't like it. So I didn't like the Bee Smart inner cover because of the way it left little gaps around the edges. So it sits on top of an 8-frame or a 10-frame standard Langstroth box. But what happened was there were little gaps there. So ants, for example, could get up in there. And the ants are a problem because not only would they access any sugar syrup or feed resources that you provided on top of that insulated inner cover, but they would also chew up the polystyrene and make nests in that insulation material because the way those inner covers are made, there's a channel so that your bees can have a vented setup, or you could flip that insert and you have the channel closed, so it's a non-vented setup, which is how I use it. But when you set it to non-vented on the interior through the plastic, there's still little holes in it, and there's a hole in the outside that allows ants and things like that to get in and chew things apart. So I did 2 things. One, I covered those holes with a little piece of aluminized tape or Reynolds aluminum foil. You cover those entrances, cover those holes that way, and now ants and things can't eat it. So now what do I do to keep those ants from getting in above that insulated inner cover and those tiny gaps? I took 3M expansion foam. And they consider that a closed cell foam, but I put that around all the edges. I let it expand, build it up around the sides, did a whole video about it. If you want to see it, go to Frederick Dunn YouTube, go up in the right-hand search bar there, and just type in feeder shim. And you'll see, or the insulated inner cover, and you'll see my modifications. Those videos are listed. So then the question here is, does it become one unit? And it does. So now I have a box with the inner cover, it's one unit. But if you ever needed to pull them apart, and it's happened inadvertently, so I've gone to pull one up because I'd forgotten that I did the expansion foam in there. And what happens is after that foam dries out, you can actually pull it off and it just holds the shape of that inner cover. In fact, if you didn't want to bond the two, you could wipe the interior surface with petroleum jelly or something like that, kind of like a mold release. And then when you put the expansion foam on it, then it wouldn't adhere to it. So now you've got a shape that you can pull it apart. Now, on the flip side of that, if you want it to adhere and be really strong and not come apart, you can dampen it a little bit with water, then spray the expansion foam, and it bonds really well. Then if you ever needed to get it apart, just, putty knife or something like that, cut it away from the interior surfaces and take it off again. Because dried expansion foam is very easy to cut and to work. So it's really not that big a nightmare, not a huge mess, but they work really well. So I'm really happy to have those Be Smart insulated inner covers. They've changed winter survival a lot. And they've also changed how much, talking about resources and how much your bees are going to need to consume going through winter by having an insulated inner cover. And in this case, I also use insulated outer covers. They consume far fewer resources going through winter. So that's question number 1. Let's go to question number 2. This is David from Houston, Texas. So in your videos, you've discussed planting borage for bees, and I elected to plant borage in my garden last fall. Then it says, Wikipedia for borage states the following: toxicity. In addition to the liver-toxic pyrrolizidine alkaloids found in the leaves and seed oil, the German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment has advised that honey from borage contains PAs and transferred to the honey through pollen collected at borage plants, and advised that commercial honey production could select for raw honey with limited PA content to prevent contamination. I'd like to hear your opinion on the subject. So that's a great question from David, and I like to fail safe. If you've been watching me at all, I don't like to play around with toxins or things that could hurt the people that are listening to me. So we need to talk about borage in general, because think about where that study was done and what type of borage it is. And I planted borage here, but the borage I planted here is common borage, is what it's called. So Borage officinalis, Officinalis. So the species is generally safe to consume in moderation. However, it can contain low levels of PAs. So the thing is, as with anything, there are some plants in the environment that might contain materials in them that could be harmful, even in the honey, even later when they get consumed by people. So we want to be aware, but borage identifies a whole group of plants. So you really need to look into these things, and that's why I always say question everything. I'm very glad that this is being questioned, because we have creeping borage, which is Borago laxiflora, Laxiflora. That species is generally considered safe, but it's best to consume it in moderation. There's also perennial borage, Borago longifolia. Sorry about all these names. Anyway, this species is known to contain higher levels of PAs, making it potentially toxic if consumed in what? Large quantities. So I want to get that down too, because there are other species that do have larger percentages of that. So the common borage, Borago officinalis, is what I've recommended, and that's the seed that I bought and shared with you, and that's what I'm growing here. It's low on that spectrum. So the other thing is, in order to get any kind of concentration of that would impact your health, and I have to make a disclaimer here that I'm not a health professional. I'm not a dietitian. So I can't tell you, from a medical authority vantage point, but based on my research, this is the one that provides the most for your bees and has the lowest potential impact on people. And the thing would be if your bees foraged exclusively on this, that's when those levels would come up. So now we're talking about almost a monoculture. And I do regret not having more borage out there, because my bees are bringing in those resources from a variety of environmental floral sources, right? So just like anything else, your diet, if it's wide and varied, you benefit from all those sources of nutrients, but you also mitigate any potentially harmful nutrient that would exist in high quantities or high concentrations that then can be unhealthy for people. So even comfrey, which we have here, I wouldn't want, a gallon of comfrey honey, for example. Now, I don't know for a fact that it's detrimental, but the plant has lots of toxic properties when it comes to people. The woman that I got my comfrey from 20 years ago, before I planted it here, she used to eat a leaf a day. One of the first things you look up on that, she was in her 80s. One of the first things you look up is how detrimental that is to your health, how dangerous the plant can be. Some people use it as a source for medicinals, but you have to have the knowledge and ability and put it into practice where you prepare it in such a way that you reduce its potential toxicity to people. But she swore by it, of course, and she just ate a leaf a day. So a leaf a day. Now, if that's all she ate, maybe that would be troublesome for her. But she has a good diet of lots of other things. So it's kind of the same thing, too. We hear about oxalic acid, which gets used in beehives to treat for the Varroa destructor mite. And you would say, well, yeah, oxalic acid exists in a lot of other plant sources, kale, carrots, things like that. So it's everywhere in plants on some level. So then people would say, but it's detrimental to your health. Well, I guess it could be if you ate a lot of some plant that had high concentrations of oxalic acid. But what was determined by the Food and Drug Administration was that there wasn't enough, even when you're giving a dose of oxalic acid to a beehive in order to control the Varroa destructor mites. It's considered an organic treatment. And then, so what if there was some residue there? So they did pre-treatment tests of honey in those hives, and they did post-treatment tests of honey in those hives to see what the measured levels were of oxalic acid. And this is just an example of when the concerns were high, but the results after scientific evaluation demonstrated that it was not of concern. That's why now in most states you can use oxalic acid vaporization in colonies with your honey supers on, even if they're intended for human consumption, because pre-treatment levels and post-treatment levels were insignificant as far as the differences. So it's just a matter of what the concentration is going to be. Now, would it be better if you're absolutely feeling safe to do nothing but plant 100% beneficial resources for your bees that could then be used for people? I would say, sure, that's probably pretty cool. But remember, your bees are going to fly up to 3 miles in every direction, and you absolutely can't control the resources they're going to get into. So that's why we want their forage to be diverse. So I'm providing diversity. But the good news, and I'm glad this question was asked, because to be honest, I had not looked into that any deeper than other than hearing it and seeing and learning that borage is a great pollinator resource. And so of course I planted it. There's some interesting things about it. By the way, it's blooming right now, and borage, my variety of that, reloads its nectaries. So in other words, once a honeybee has been there and collected nectar and flown away, 2 minutes later, it's back at the same level of nectar loading that it had when the bee visited it the first time. So every couple of minutes, you can go back to that flower and just watch it, and the bees hit it like clockwork. So even the honeybees understand when to go back and get that nectar. So on the list of all of the borage varieties, the officinalis is pretty darn good. So I realize I gave a lengthy explanation, but I want you to understand my thought process behind that. And if it were the one, for example, that they listed it. So for example, if it said Borago longifolia, Longifolia, if that were what I was thinking about planting, I would stop. Just because of all the borage, it's the high one. So, moving right on. Great question. I like to be asked about things I've recommended and suggested, and if there's any risk, especially to human health and well-being, I definitely want to know. I welcome those questions and challenges. Question number 3 comes from Devin from Arlington, Kentucky. I heard someone the other day say being able to read IPM gridded insert is an important skill for beekeepers. So if you don't know what IPM is, it's Integrated Pest Management, which means you're doing something to your hive configuration or the way you manage your bees or you're providing equipment that helps your bees manage pests, and in this case, Varroa destructor mites. So is there more than just counting mites that is used for? And if so, this would be a great topic to cover for us new beekeepers. Okay, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking about it right now. So this ties in because there's a new product, and I talked to this at our recent bee breakfast, so now I'm going to share it with you. Bee Smart Designs. We just finished talking about their insulated inner covers. They have a new bottom board. Now, if you watch my videos and you look at all the videos that show my different beehives, sometimes I'll just do a video that like 35 landing boards in 10 minutes or something like that. You might notice you don't see a lot of white landing boards, bottom boards on my beehives. And that's because I did not like the one that came before this one. It had a stainless steel screen on the bottom. It bent around a little bit. It has holes in the side that sit on the Bee Smart, you guessed it, hive stand. So screws that hold that together. So this is all designed to be part of a unit. The new one, when I got it, I thought, I don't know if this is going to be any better, but surprise, surprise, it actually is. So instead of the screen, and I'm going to talk about this integrated pest management because it's a good tie-in here. So I'm going to explain some stuff. So Bee Smart Designs made a new bottom board. I like this one. It's tougher. It's more rigid. They've got a raised edge across the back. It's got little raised posts in the middle here that keep your box centered on it so it doesn't slide off. It also has some advantages that I'm going to go over. Now, he says that this is for 8 or 10 frame Langstroth box. These little plastic pieces here, there is a space in the insulated inner cover that exists just to hold these if you don't need them. So when your box is sitting on here, these segments would be wide open for your bees to come and go. Then you have these inserts here. This is a mouse guard. So if that were to go on there, I'm going to get around to the integrated pest management, but I'm going to talk about all the features while we're here. So mouse guards go on, but let's say, I don't want my bees going through in and out the whole front. So the way these inserts are, you just flip them over. Now we close it up on the edge there. Close it up on the edge over here. And now the bees would only come and go through the middle. Or maybe you just want your bees to come and go over here. Or maybe you've got 3 hives side by side and you have one enter through the side, the next hive enters through the middle, and the other hive enters through the other side. Because bees like to orient physically to the things that they see. So anyway, now we only have the middle open. We have to close it up and transfer the bees. So we're going to ship them somewhere. Now we flip this over and they can vent, but they can't get in and out because the box covers these holes up here, right? But then you might be saying, but Fred, ventilation, how do they breathe? I'm glad you asked. So let's get rid of these, but we'll pretend they're in place. Now it's going to take us to our pest management part. This has an insert, which by the way, I didn't like the insert before. Do you know why? It wasn't tight enough up to this bottom. This is part of the integrated pest management. Your Varroa destructor mites would fall through these openings, which used to be a stainless steel screen. Now it's this rigid plastic and it's nice and firm. The Varroa mites would fall through and then you have to trap them underneath. So they had an insert board before, but when you looked at the back of the old one, that insert board hung down. In fact, I think there were 2 levels on it. So you could have it open so it would drop down a notch. Therefore, now the back is open. And if you did oxalic acid, all the vapor just shot right out the back. Now, it's not like that. Now we have a single position for that insert board, which is part of integrated pest management. And it's snug up to the bottom, just the way I like it. Now, if you've listened to me in the past, I like trays on the bottom. But now we're going to talk about pest management. Look at this grid. Now, if you go and look at these things online, you can get them from Dadant. A lot of different bee suppliers sell them. And you'll see them sold as sticky boards. So I did look at Dadant today, Dadant, however you want to say it, D-A-D-A-N-T. They're $5 a sheet with this grid, and they're already sticky. You might notice with the great penmanship here that I did this one myself. I did this one myself today just because I knew I was going to talk to you about it. So now we have 1-inch grids. What is the point of that? The point is, so when the mites go through that, in this case, the Be Smart Designs Ultimate Bottom Board, it's called. Everything from Be Smart Designs is ultimate. So once they go through and they get on here, they tool around. All kinds of other detritus shows up on the bottom here too. This is fun. I like inserts in this case. I am going to be using these because now I like them all of a sudden. I like the way it's made. I see a lot of potential here. So if you buy them for $5 a piece, good for you, sticky board. But here's the thing, once everything gets on it, because they get dirty pretty darn quick. Once you do that, you're replacing the sticky board. So mites fall through, get stuck in place, can't go anywhere. So I'm going to tell you how to do your own. Buy a packet of this core flute, whatever you want to call it, and mark your own grid. This is with a Sharpie, so it's indelible ink. And then you smear it with petroleum jelly, a really thin layer of petroleum jelly. Just enough. Because here's what I've noticed, and I did do a video, which I don't know if I'll dig that out and add it to the end of today's YouTube maybe. Varroa mites are clumsy little pests because I've watched them tool around on the bottom, and they'll interact with some little piece of propolis or some little piece of beeswax and little thing. It's like, it's more awkward than a turtle. They grab something like they're going to climb over it, then they flip over on their back and they just lay there completely helpless. A Varroa destructor mite on its back. What if I had a model of one so I could show you what I'm talking about? So look at the way this thing is configured. Now, of course, this isn't life size. They're not this big. But that little Varroa destructor mite was swooling along. And of course, I break out the macro lens right away because I have to get a video of it. I needed to see how it was doing. Now, this one was just groomed off of a bee. So it didn't fall down because of a Varroa destructor mite treatment. It just got groomed off, fell through the bottom, and got on the board. Now, if there's nothing sticky to hold it there, which was the case with the one that I was observing, it could, in theory, crawl around, get back up the wall, get back up through the screen, get back up inside the hive, and then get itself back on the body of a bee. These are female mites. They're capable of reproduction. That's why we want them all dead. So, stooling around, tried to climb over something, flipped on its back. Darn, that little rascal just could not get itself right side up again. And then it was amazing to me how quickly it gave up. And unless another mite tooled over it, or unless a honeybee walked over the top, which can't happen because this is happening underneath the screen, this thing is just going to lay there until it's dead. Isn't that sad? So, but now you've smeared your Vaseline on it, your petroleum jelly. And the mite went through, made the mistake of falling through or getting groomed or was being chased by bees. Bees do try to bite them. It's really frustrating to watch a bee have a mite climb onto it and the bee not even notice that the mite just did that. I much rather see the mite get the mandible treatment from a grooming bee inside, which is another trait in bees that helps them defend themselves from Varroa destructor mites. This over-grooming, this sensitivity to the mites, smelling them, understanding, and then they bite their little feet off. Another sad moment for the mite. So anyway, now they fall through because they got groomed and they're stuck. Why? Because you smeared petroleum jelly on it. And there it was. Now, in the past, I've also recommended Pam cooking spray, but I also kind of like the petroleum jelly idea a little better. And then later you can wipe it all off. Now, here's the thing. That mite was on the board, and now we're counting them. This is why we have the grid, because we know that 11C had 3 mites on it. And part of the question was, at what point would you treat for mites? So we put a brand new insert in here. You marked it all off. You taught your understudies, your grandsons, in my case the supervisor, how to use a ruler, how to measure out a grid, and how to establish a 1-inch grid on a board, and then how to plot a grid. So this is great for those who have homeschoolers and want to teach a process, right? So now we have 14B had 3 mites, so you write that in your notes. There were 2 or 3 other mites up here at G8, and so that's why we have the grid. It's up to you to decide at what point you would go to treatment for your mite. Some people see a mite and it's time to treat. Boom, go get them. But there is a new study which I found very interesting. So once again, I'm thankful for Devin, because Devin made me revisit something that I haven't looked at for a while. So what do I always do? I look up the science and see what's going on. And do you know there was another study published in July of 2024? That's fresh. So these were the results. And I'm going to link the study. You need to read the whole thing if you want to really get way down the rabbit hole and understand all their processes and exactly what the controls were, of course. Controls would be no bottom boards or no screens, and so they evaluate Varroa mite levels in these colonies. The colonies were all sized about the same, but this was the part that caught my eye here was the results. Colonies that had sticky bottom boards. So that's what this would be, an insert. Sticky because you have a resource on it like the Vaseline, or you bought sticky boards for $5 a piece wherever you get them. They had 50% less, that's a big number, Varroa infestation than colonies with conventional bottom boards at the end of the study. So if you want to know the duration, the conditions of the study, all of the parameters, which is why they publish papers. When you publish a paper on a study that you've done, first of all, you have to identify what the problem is, what you hope to discover in the paper, and then you set about writing this lengthy line-by-line statement of all the controls of your study. What kind of bottom board did you use? What climate were you in? What kind of beehive did you have? What kind of screen did you have above the sticky board? So all of these things have to be defined to make a very good, comprehensive, detailed study. So, but that was interesting to me because what I've always said in the past was based on studies done by Florida State. And they were the ones that came out with a 15% passive mite control just by having screened bottom boards. Now, that's key. Screened bottom board does not necessarily say that they had something to catch the mites underneath. That meant that the screen was open to the outside and the mites would fall through. So when you do that, how do they know how many mites they were killing, and how do they know what the mite load was in the hive to begin with? And that's where the published studies come in. They explain how they discerned that, right? So with this one, with the sticky boards, 50% mite control. So now it starts to look like if we're doing other things too. So we're approaching this through genetics. So you've got bees that are Varroa sensitive, hygienic bees, VSH, right? You might hear that acronym, that's Varroa sensitive hygienic bees. So in other words, they don't put up with Varroa destructor mites being in their hive. They also don't put up with them being in their pupa state. So in other words, when they have pupa, and whether it's drones or workers, they can smell it right through the capping. They cut the capping open, they desiccate the mites, which means they dry them out. And sometimes they leave the capping open, and that bee still completes its growth and development, which is very interesting too. Or at other times they recap it afterwards. So they're killing mites. They're actively seeking and chewing mites. Look up Purdue ankle biters if you want to find out more about bees that attack mites. So this is interesting. I'm going to include the study, but Varroa infestation levels, this was the other interesting part. Varroa infestation levels did not differ significantly between the tubular screen and the conventional bottom boards. So this is bottom board configuration. Who cares? Now, no differences were observed in honey production between colonies from different groups. So in other words, they were getting a handle on the mites. They were knocking them down. But the colonies did not significantly perform better with the higher mite loads than those with the lower mite loads. Now you might think, aha, see, you don't even have to treat for mites. Listen, this is one study, one off. This is not saying, let's look at this colony 3 years down the road with no treatment, the controls with no intervention on the Varroa destructor mites at all. You have to follow them for a longer period of time. This is why brand new beekeepers get bees. And if they're like me, back when I started keeping bees, I thought, man, I don't want to treat those bees. I want survivor stock. I don't want to treat them at all. I want them to adapt. And I want the bees that get killed by mites to die. And I want the bees that live to live. And then those are the ones that can survive the mites. And that seems like a really good philosophy, and selective breeding and all of that, Darwinian beekeeping. So it feels good, but you have to follow them for several years to really recognize the long-term damage that the Varroa destructor mites and the vectored diseases that they have with them. You have to see how that builds on a colony, how that builds up, and eventually your colony can collapse or spread it to others. So there's so many studies going on. So don't get super excited and think this is all you need to do. You need to continue with all of your other monitoring and evaluation. But this is very interesting to me. I hope you'll take the time to read the study, July of 2024, sticky bottom boards, because a lot of my beehives are on standard wooden bottom boards that don't have removable anything on them. And that's because, again, long term, I need all these comparisons. So I have those with trays, those without, those with solid bottom boards, those with screens, those with, now we'll be putting these new BeeSmart Designs bottom boards on, because guess what? No painting. They never rust. They'll never rot. And integrated pest management. And this insert is closed up enough that I can still do my favorite treatment, which is oxalic acid vaporization. And then we'll pull this out and see after treatment how many mites do we get. I'm always surprised when somebody sends me a picture. First of all, I'm not asking you to send me pictures, but when almost every one of these little squares would have like 3 or 4 mites in it, we're talking about hundreds of mites. I've never had that in one of my beehives. That is a real problem. So if you have removable inserts, you'll know what's going on and you'll understand what the mite loads are. It also helps you determine the effectiveness of the treatment that you're using to kill the mites. Because the dying mites, when you do oxalic acid vaporization or whatever other treatment, if you use Formic Pro or whatever it happens to be, when the mites die, they fall through the bottom. If you have this type of bottom board that can actually contain them, and then you'll be able to see all the dead mites after the initial treatment. So you get a sense of how effective your treatment is. And that's why we often say, did you treat for mites? Yeah, I treated for mites. So what was your mite load after you treated? Oh, I don't know, I just treat them. Well, what was your mite load before you treated for mites? So I don't know, I just treat them all. Well, see, that's kind of a bad practice, because you don't know, first of all, if they even needed treatment. And if they did need it and you did the treatment, you need to do a follow-up to count for mites, and some people are very resistant to killing bees to count mites. And that means the mite wash, right? 200 bees, 300 bees, whatever the mite wash that you use is. And they don't want to kill them to count the mites. So at your last treatment, put in a fresh board and see what the drop is. So if your initial one, you had over 100 mites on this sticky bottom board, and you got rid of that, or if you use the petroleum jelly method, you cleaned it up and recoated it, and now you can use it again. If you did that and you did the treatments, and the last treatment that you did, whatever the treatment you've chosen to use is, and now you only see 3 or 4 mites on the bottom, that demonstrates to me that your treatment was effective. Now your bees are ending up their productive year with a very low mite load. So all that comes because Devin asked this question, and because BeeSmart Designs came out with a new bottom board that I actually like. So we're in. It's good. Another thing I was thinking about while I'm on this subject, the way that, by the way, really tough. Good job, BeeSmart Designs. Anyway, what I was noticing here is the way that goes in, there's room for an actual tray here. I don't know that a tray exists right now, but how much more would I like it if it were a tray I could slide in, and it just has little wings on the sides that then would hold onto these edges as it goes in. Instead of that core flute, now I have a reservoir, which I personally like better. Another thing that we talk about in the wintertime, condensation that forms inside the hive and drips down. If you've got a solid bottom board, I highly recommend you tip your solid bottom board slightly towards the front, because if moisture builds up on a solid bottom board, I do not want that to pool in the back. I want it to trickle forward and pour out the front. Now, if you've got a screen bottom board, where does that moisture go? It does not build up on the bottom of your hive. It goes through the screen. And in this case, with just an insert, if a lot of moisture developed inside and it dripped out here, it would just run down the sides of the insert because this is not watertight. So a tray collects some moisture because that, again, I'm just one of those people that likes to know things. So when I pull out my trays, I like to see what's in the tray, so I sort through all that stuff. And I also want to see how much moisture is collecting. And because removable trays are partitioned, I know if it's happening, and it normally happens towards the forward third of your bottom board. Very little going on back here. But there are a lot of things, if you're just somebody who wants to know things and wants to see what's in the bottom. What is that, a lacewing larvae? That little thing looks like an antlion. Look how ridiculous they are. So it's alive, the stuff that's in those trays. There's all kinds of little microorganisms moving around. So if you like tiny bugs, get trays. Maybe you could configure this to just set a tray under it and enclose the rest of it. Although the designer of this does not want this to sit on a solid surface. If you did that, what would happen? What if I just put this on a piece of plywood and had the insert there? You know what's going to move in under it? A mouse, almost right away. Probably the first night that it's out there. Going to get checked out by mice. So that's it for that. I think I answered Devin's question. So IPM grid, as far as the numbers specific, how to read it is just, plotting. You're just plotting where your mites are for your records, how many mites you found, and it helps you count them easier. If you have an ungridded sheet and there's just mites all over, it's very difficult to count them unless you're collecting them as you count them and taking them off the board. So it's fun, it's interesting, and it's a great learning tool. So did you know that is the last question for today? That's right, 3 questions. So we're in the fluff section. I want to mention, this is possibly your last chance for those switchgrass smoker pellets. The volunteers that we have burnt out. So, and I want to thank you, those of you that supported. It's a nonprofit organization, the Northwest Pennsylvania Beekeepers Association. Was selling those pellets provided by Ernst Seeds as smoker fuel, and exclusively through the Northwest Pennsylvania Beekeepers Association. We have a website. There'll be a link down in the description below. But at the end of this month, you might be seeing the end of those pellet sales. So I want to give a shout out to the volunteers that we have that helped out with that, because the nonprofit, the whole point of the profits from the pellet sales was to further honeybee research and education, right? All free. No one was paid a dime. So I want to give a shout out to Bill and Wendy, who used their house as the staging area, drove down, collected these things, and put it all together, and they've been responding to you, the people that have bought it. And the feedback is overwhelmingly positive for the function of smoker pellets that just don't go out, that last a long time, that provide a cool, dense smoke that your bees respond to. It is the best smoker fuel I have ever used. And also, the way volunteers are, people just show up to help out when there's work that needs to be done. And so I'm shouting out to Brent and Penny, who showed up and did hours of boxing, packaging, and helping to ship out these pellets to people that cared and wanted to support the cause. So thank you for that. There is a link down below, but at the end of the month, that might be the end of it. So I was also told by Bill, who runs that, whoever puts in that last order for the pellets will get a 2 for 1. So 2 orders of pellets for the price of 1. That'll be the last person. And it'll just be a surprise, a way of saying thank you. So I appreciate the support. The organization appreciates the support, and it goes to a very good cause. All nonprofit. Nobody was paid. So anyway, the second part here, last honey harvest. So a lot of you are long done harvesting your honey. But I just want to address those who are in the northeastern United States, for example, that still have some nectar flow going on, because we have it going on really strong. So I wanted to mention that when you're about to pull off your tops, because a lot of people that are brand new to beekeeping have concerns or are a little challenged about how do we pack down when there's so many bees in a hive and things like that. So you have to really assess the population of the bees in the hive, and they're working it right now. So this is our last honey draw, because we're leaving them enough time so that they can replenish what we've taken off by filling the lower cells. And I use always as my key as far as what's going on with the other hives. I look at the observation hives. And I have observation hives right now that are practically honey bound. In other words, I have a queen roaming around that has no place to put eggs right now. And for me, that's okay, because we've got some rain in the forecast. It's going to be cooling down. And they'll be consuming the honey that's stored in the open cells first, and then that immediately can be used and made available for brood production for your bees. So I don't see that as a problem at all. And all of my observation hives are just 9-frame hives. So that would be the equivalent of setting up a 10-frame deep and having that be the entire hive. So I look at those and see kind of what the productivity is, and if things are really wet, and so they're filling it with nectar. And that building smells fantastic because it's full of pollen and, of course, the nectar that's coming in. So for those that are packing down, you use a bee escape. If you don't know what a bee escape is, please look it up. You can also go to my website, my YouTube channel, Frederick Dunn, and type in the search bee escapes, and I make comparisons, and my favorite bee escape is the Ciracel bee escape. You put it on for a day, so you put it on about this time of day. It's right in the middle of the afternoon now. And then tomorrow, the same time, you would go back, and that's when you would pull the supers off, and the bees will be down below. Now, the other thing is, I like to put the supers back on and let them clean up the frames, because this time of year, if you put the supers back on, so you mark them for the hives that they came off of, and you do your best to put them back on the same hive that you removed it from, just as a precaution against the potential of spreading around disease if there happens to be some kind of buildup in the comb and things like that. We're not spreading that to other beehives. So you put it back on, you let them clean it up again for another day or several hours. They go right to work on it, by the way, if the weather's warm. And if you have a rainy day, it's a great way to put it on as a resource for them. They clean it up really well. Then you're going to remove it the following day. So I wouldn't leave that on for more than 24 hours. We don't want them back filling it again with more nectar, right, and honey. So then you take it off, and it's time to put it into storage. So we're trying to pack down. Some people speculate that we're going to have a warmer season longer. In other words, fall's really not going to hit by the calendar, right? That in other words, we're getting warmer periods here in the northeastern U.S., and that we're somehow going to have an extended nectar flow, that then the bees will continue to bring it in for longer. So some people are putting off that last harvest of honey and packing down their hives. And if that's your instinct and you feel like there's just too much coming in, then you might want to stall a little bit on that. Worst case scenario, you take it off too soon, you pack them down too soon, you get end of the month swarm, which would be really bad. I've not had in the past a colony swarm in October. So that's not to say it couldn't happen, but I've been doing this cycle this way for many years here, and it has always worked. But you're going to have to read your colonies. So then we're going to pack down, get them cleaned up. Also, as I've been saying right along, please process your honey as soon as possible. Goldenrod honey, aster honey, and stuff like that solidifies, crystallizes very quick. My wife tells me in a matter of days it's already starting to look hazy in the jars, and we just harvested it. So some people I was seeing don't even take honey when, the goldenrod is blooming and stuff, because they just don't like it. It's too grainy. It's too sugary and gritty and whatever. I like it. I think it's great. I think it's worth harvesting. Go ahead. Leave your bees with about 47 to 50 pounds of honey here in this part of the country if you're not venting the top and if you have insulated inner covers. So that's pretty good. Planning for winter feeding. So just as we opened with today, start to plan and figure out which of your colonies need work and need help. And even if you're combining colonies, remember, if we have a struggling colony and we combine that population with a stronger colony, we increase the colony population, which means if you get a week of rain, for example, which I really, by the way, wish would happen, they consume their resources so fast that you could end up having to supplemental feed them. So be thoughtful about whether or not you even want to combine a colony together, right? So supplemental feeding, sugar syrup until it starts to get cold at night, and 2 to 1, the higher concentrations. Some people like to open feed. And I'd like to point out something else that's back in the studies that is really interesting to me. Spirulina. The spirulina powder is something I was using before, and it is an algae treatment. There's a new study about that and how effective that is for the bees. And the only way to deliver it to them is in sugar syrup, of course. So this would be the time of year after your supers are off. This is what it looks like. Spirulina. This is expired. I don't know what happens to algae when it expires, but I've had this one since 2022. So I don't know, it might still be good. I mean, maybe they just have to put an expiration date on it. This has never been opened, so the way, if for those of you who want to try this out, please read the study. So I will link the spirulina study and show you what the benefits are and what's going on there. I'll also explain how you mix it up, because if you mix up sugar syrup, that stuff is the consistency of talcum powder. And that one is intended for human consumption. So it's very fine, and of course it's organic and all that stuff. But if you go to take a couple tablespoons of that, and you're going to put that into a half a gallon of sugar syrup, you just dump it in there, it will not mix up in the sugar syrup. You'll get little clumps everywhere, it sticks all over your spoon, it's on the edges, it's so hard to mix up. So this is what you do. If you get, and this is the one that I chose, it's micro ingredients, USDA organic, vegan, non-GMO, blah, 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 organic spirulina. I'll leave a link to this and where I got it. But what I did is I put the sugar syrup together. All right, let me back up. I take dry sugar. I put 2 tablespoons to 4 pounds of dry sugar. 2 tablespoons spirulina, 4 pounds dry sugar. And I stir the dry ingredients together until it's consistent, until it basically looks olive green. It looks army green. So you keep mixing that up until it's thoroughly mixed with just the dry sugar. Then you heat your water up. Then you mix it all together. And at that point, what you end up with is a green sugar syrup. And this is a fun test to do, because I'm going to do it again, by the way, just for kicks, now that it's resurfaced and now the studies are here supporting it, by the way, saying that it does a lot of things for the bees. Extensive, really good stuff for the bees. So I will be putting out a feeder of spirulina sugar syrup and regular sugar syrup, the same consistency without the spirulina. And we're going to see if the bees have a preference. See if they even know if it's good for them or not. And I know a lot of people say, yeah, well, you're not going to get your kids to eat broccoli. So I don't know, you haven't met my grandkids. They walk around with broccoli and eat it like cotton candy. They love it. So anyway, if the bees sense that this has value, to their metabolism, to their health and well-being, and they go after it, then it'll be fun to show that. So if you want to spike your sugar syrup and your open feeding, if you're one of those people, then adding sugar and spirulina together and then mixing that with the water and coming up with a spirulina treat for your bees that is healthy for them, then I think that's a great way to go. So look for that. I'll link the study down in the description of this video below, and then that will hopefully help you out if you really want to study up and learn more about it and what it's good for. So one thing's for sure, it doesn't hurt them at all, and it's good for people, they say. So I want to thank you for being with me today and for listening, and I want to thank those who submitted their topics. I try to choose topics that I feel will be applicable to most viewers and listeners. And for those of you who may be wondering, of course, I'm doing this now at the very end. But this is also a podcast, so it's available through Podbean and others, iHeartRadio, and so on. All you have to do is Google The Way to Be podcast, and you'll find out. You can listen. It's an entire series. Thanks a lot for being here. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and that all your bees are healthy and that they don't leave home and swarm on you.